Greetings, everyone. Once again, welcome to another session of To an Imperfect Union. Uh, Tonight, my guest is going to be Miss La Sims, and she is from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Um, if you notice, I'm trying to get as many people as I can from that particular city, that particular region, to find out exactly how they feel about the George Floyd jury, how selection is going on, perhaps even their opinion on the city's settlement. And more importantly, how the city moves on from there. It when your city has been the object of so much scrutiny, how does one recover from that stain? This is the city where racist police executed a black man in front of a nationwide and worldwide audience. And in the ensuing years since, have things really changed? How have we changed? Well, we do have Joe Biden in the White House. But once again, I come down to or I come back to my original slogan: you can't legislate hate. Now, this has a two-edged, it's like a two-edged sword. It cuts both ways. And by that, I mean, when you have a police department that is more engaged in protecting its image than it is in doing its job and protect and serve. No matter what, and we've seen this for many years. You can call it liberal, you can call it, you know, uh, you can call it Black Lives Matter, you can call it anything but humanitarianism that police have managed to inflict upon this country for many years. It's like I liken it to being a soldier. At a certain point, you are convinced that you are invincible. You are convinced that you can do no wrong. And police have been afforded this opportunity, especially in our neighborhoods. Uh, by our neighborhood, I mean black neighborhoods, of course. Uh, people of they're not just black neighborhoods, brown neighborhoods, and hey, I don't know whether you people are familiar with the fact or not, but there are such things as poor white neighborhoods too, and some of them are just as dangerous, if not more so, than the black neighborhoods. But of course, you don't really hear about those because it's more fashionable to talk about black on black crime. So therefore, it's like once you put on that uniform, you have a license to hunt. And in the George Floyd case, you didn't even do it under the cover of darkness. This was blatantly done in daylight in front of a live audience, filmed from someone's iPhone, right? I believe it went straight to the internet. Something that we are able to do in today's age. Looks like Mr. Sims won't be joining us. So let me go on. Um, I was glad to see that the new charge of, excuse me, let me change the station on here because there might be some breaking news. Oh, okay. Um, anyway, as I was saying, I was glad to see that the third degree murder statute was enforced. Um, Personally, I think it should be first degree murder. Uh, I guess it depends upon your interpretation of premeditation. But in my observation, I watched him put his knee on the neck of this man for 8 minutes, 46 seconds. I watched this man ask for his mother and say, I can't breathe. At some point, when you do not remove your knee from this man's neck, the idea of permanently silencing or uh, making sure that I can't say what I know is I think is going through this man's mind, but 8 minutes. If I went 8 minutes and 46 minutes silent on this recording, it would probably astound you. But we've been through this. We've went through this 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Dave Chappelle, people that are funnier than I am, people that are more knowledgeable than I am, have all presented this 8 minutes and 46 seconds. I'm very interested in the final makeup of this jury. Um, although I will say that something over here is right. Okay. Although I will say that so far it seems a relatively fair combination. But then I look at or I hear some of the questions from the lawyers, and it almost seems like they're soliciting a plea before selecting the jury. For instance, one of the questions was, I believe, would you feel comfortable finding the defendant not guilty? I have never heard such a prejudgmental question to a juror. And I really don't understand how the judge could have allowed this. Why not ask, are you willing to be able to find this man guilty? What about those questions? Whoa, I have to do something here. Uh, Something I forgot to do earlier. Excuse me. But if you're listening, let's see. Is anyone in the chat room? Okay. Any questions? Any questions from the listeners? I'm going to open up the chat room here. Okay, we're going to open up the chat room here for a few moments. Okay. Um, where's my Where's my cup here? Excuse me. It's really old school here. Mason jar. Got my apple juice. Trying to stay hydrated. Um, in case I didn't tell anyone, or in case you are wondering, yes, I've had my second COVID shot. I got it on the 2nd of March. My 14-day period will be over with tomorrow. So I'm thinking about maybe getting back out there in society a little bit, maybe going to see the family or things like that. It's been almost 13 months, uh, about 12 months, 2 weeks since I've seen my little brother. So I'll probably jump up to LA sometime soon and see how he's doing. But I had no ill effects from the second shot. As a matter of fact, the first I had more of a irritation and probably side effects during the first shot. Felt a little achy, but second shot, no problem, done deal. And I urge everyone that's listening to me to go and get your shot, especially if you're my age. Maybe if you're younger, you can roll the dice, but that's on you. As I said, I don't begrudge anyone what their decision is. I wear my mask and I took my shots so that I would feel safe. Now, if you're comfortable, as I said, rolling the dice with your life, that's fine. Anyway, let's get back to while we're talking about rolling the dice. Let's get back to Officer Carlin and George Floyd. There's a local election going on in, I believe it's the Fifth Ward uh, in Milwaukee. And once again, as I said, they have a dilemma uh, because in certain parts of the city, crime is out of hand, and you need police in the neighborhood. But once again, while needing the police, do you trust the police? Because everyone that walks around, that lives or walks around or walks through or visits someone in uh, what we would call a high crime neighborhood does not necessarily are not necessarily criminals. There are law-abiding citizens in high crime neighborhoods. Every black uh, kid in Chicago is not a shooter. Every black kid in Milwaukee, Wisconsin is not a shooter. But what is the trust factor? I understand, and we had Mr. Lewis on the show last week. I'm going to invite him back, especially once this jury has been settled. Uh, can you be protected by a force that you don't trust. And here's another problem that I have. The violence comes from kids and young adults. Now, at one time, you had a different generation going through this. Most of them are now in their 30s, 40s, some even older if they live to be that old. But what I'm saying is, I don't think that people, once again, my age in their 70s and 80s, we should feel safe, but we should not be the ones that are designating what happens within our neighborhoods. We should be a part of it. We should feel safe in it. But our neighborhoods should be better for the generation growing up, not worse. Those people in in their 30s and 40s are the ones that should be getting in line to lift our neighborhoods up. These are the people back in the 70s and 80s. This was our middle class. The middle class, black folks, have moved out of these neighborhoods for the majority. I mean, there are some that have been there for generations. Their home has been passed down from their fathers to their mothers, fathers, grandfathers. I understand that. But for the most part, a lot of these people have bought into neighborhoods. They've sold their homes and they're trying to make somewhere much better for their families. So that core neighborhood, in a lot of instances, is gone. And the young people have seen the majority of the people in those neighborhoods go through the crack era, which has done, which has done. Uh, this was almost genocide protracted upon Black America. Because nobody cared about the crack era as long as it was in black neighborhoods. When white children started coming to the black neighborhoods to purchase crack is when it became a problem. Just like the opioids. And I know I've said this before, Mr. King, you're just preaching that, but to the best of my knowledge, we still don't have any black-owned shipping companies. I don't think we have any black-owned, and I say this for America. We don't have any black-owned shipping companies. We have no black-owned cargo ships. Major airplanes, and most of all, South American connection. Sure, I know you've seen Snowfall and you've seen White Boy Rick and Freeway Rick and all that. Hey, Freeway Rick, check out our Tuesday night podcast with Kenine Bundridge. Freeway Ricky is now into boxing and he's restarted his life. But these were all brought here by other connections. Freeway Ricky was, I mean, he profited just like White Boy Rick and some others. I mean, hey, a lot of people profited, but like I said, I don't think you can trace that back to any black owned shipping company, any black owned cargo line, any black owned airlines. But we sure got a lot of dope in the neighborhood. And as you've heard, even here in San Diego, weapons being left in minority neighborhoods to keep things inflamed. Now, I haven't seen any with my own eyes. I won't say that. But what I will say is that if it could happen in an era as unsophisticated as the 70s and 80s, why is it impossible for it to happen now? And to top that all off, now they also, if Wisconsin is also one of the states where they want to make uh, voting registration and voting rights much harsher for the black community. And when I say harsher, I mean as far as them being able to get to the polls, as far as them being able to register, uh, no voting on Sundays. I mean, America, I am very frustrated. It is not 1968. It is not 1972. It's not 1978. But I'm pushing for HR 1. I'm pushing for voting rights. Has George Wallace suddenly been reincarnated? Um, my second guess, Mr. McCrory, was a member of the communications industry for most of his adult life. This gentleman was with the communications company before it was called AT&T, when it was called Ma Bell. And every state had a Ma Bell. And all of a sudden, it was fashionable that we break up this monopoly called Bell Telephone. It has been replaced with AT&T. Let's see if we can find Mr. McCrory here. Okay. Where are you, sir? Excuse me 1 minute here. Let me grab him. Uh, okay, let's see. Where's Mr. McCrory? I think this is. Let's see. Okay. Okay. Uh, let's see. It's in there. Okay. And let's go on here. See if I can find him here. Let's see. What's this? Okay. Well, I don't see Mr. McCrory. Let's see. I may have his number on here.
Hi there.
Hello, sir. We're waiting for you on the show.
Oh, I thought I did the right thing here. I guess I did hit the right button, huh?
No, you have to. I sent you a StreamYard link. All you have to do is hit that, and you'll come up right on the screen.
That's what I did. I don't know why it's not working. Oh, go ahead and try it again. Here's your link. That's what I tapped on. Let's see if it works right this time.
Are you on? Are you on Facebook?
No, I'm on YouTube.
Oh, I tell you what. I'll send you a link to this number and get you right in.
Okay.
All right. Hold on. Okay. So, guess that was my fault there. Let's go back and grab my StreamYard link here. Uh, Sorry about that, everyone. Um, okay. All right. We're gonna do this. Give me. Uh, okay. Okay. I don't want none of this. Okay. 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 Uh, got a lot of things going on here. Give me 1 second, everyone. And oh, there we go. There's Dan. Sorry about that. We finally got you in there. Not sure what happened there, but you're
Okay.
here. You're here, and that's all that matters.
There you go.
I was just giving my audience a little background here because you and I might be the only ones that remember Ma Bell.
Oh, yes.
For
better or worse.
for better or worse. But I was remember living in Ohio, and I got my little bill every month from Ma Bell, Bell of Ohio, and when you moved to New York, you had Bell of New York, and from what I understand, you were a part of that revolution or evolution, whatever you want to call it.
A little bit of both.
Okay. Well, tell us, how we got to AT&T.
Well, originally it was all AT&T, and then along in '80. Well, actually, when I started the phone company, which was '73, right around that same time, MCI, who was trying to get into the long distance market, sued AT&T for being an oligarchy, or what's another word for oligarchy? Um,
Monopoly, I guess,
There you
wasn't it?
go. That was the word. And it took them years of back and forth and fighting until a federal court decided that rather than have AT&T pay this exorbitant fee to MCI, that they would break up the phone company, which is not what MCI wanted, because of that, MCI eventually died. So they were never around to see their victory. And we broke up into 7 baby bells. And like the Terminator 3 movie, it all came right back together again. And here we were, but we were SBC. But SBC knew that the AT&T name carried more weight, so they changed their name to AT&T. So that's how we ended up here again.
I remember. Well, I think my Apple account at one time was SVC Global.
That could be. I don't know. They've done so much shuffling around, buying
Well,
this
I mean,
company and selling that company, and
well, I
and
mean, that I've had that that Apple ID for probably almost a decade. Things have changed a lot since then, but
oh yeah.
yeah, now it's Gmail or AT. But anyway, so how did you first get involved in communications? Was that something that you had taken in college, or?
No,
Uh,
actually, I lived with my grandmother and my great granddad, and we lived in Denver. And this was the first gas crisis. And I had a job at a gas station, and they had a rule with the corporation that even if there was no work to be done, they had to guarantee you so many hours per week. So I would party with my friends, go in, pick up a paycheck, and go party some more. And my grandmother got real sick of that, and she said, "Go apply at the phone company or something, will you?" So I applied, and they gave me a test, and they offered me a job right away, because it was they're putting non-traditional people in traditional jobs. For instance, they had women climbing poles, and they had men doing clerical work. So that's how I got in, due to my typing.
Okay. Yeah, I was in the cable communications for a while, and uh, believe me, I never want to see another crawl space or go up another telephone pole.
I know what you mean.
But the name of your book, Capitalism Kills.
Killed the middle class. 25 ways the system is rigged against you. I just happen to have a copyright here.
Okay. And this is something that I've said for quite some time, even before I started doing podcasts, is that the middle class has been killed.
Beaten
But
down.
but perhaps you have a different perspective from your book.
Well, one of the things I realized pretty quickly was that the system, as I say in the subtitle, there are at least 25 ways the system is rigged against you. And we've seen that in so many, whether it's healthcare.
Now, when you say rigged against you, you're talking about in general. You're not talking about a specific race. You're not talking about,
Well, there's some of that.
Okay. Go
In
on.
fact,
Okay.
I cover that in a lot of chapters.
Okay.
The one on criminal justice. I mean, look what happened with our savior, Bill Clinton, who created this crime bill in 1994 that made almost everybody an instant criminal. And we keep shooting ourselves in the foot as Democrats. And I've seen that things like that. And let's take, for instance, if you and I went to a phone store and picked up a case for our phone. If you didn't have if you didn't have the receipt handy, they might stop you. Whereas I would probably breeze in and out. And there's something wrong with the system that has that kind of built-in racism in it. And what I try to point to in my book is that the labor movement is eventually going to be the salvation of the middle class, because a collective voice has much more power than one voice out in the wilderness.
But aren't we past the days of the strong unions? I mean, you look at what's happening with Amazon. I look at when I first moved out here to California, you had a food strike with the food workers. You look at some different, even the auto union.
Which I used to be a part.
It might be strong, but you have less members now because there's fewer jobs. So
and that's part of it. My sequel to this book is going to be called Rebuilding Union. And you're right. What needs to happen is the union needs to rebuild itself from the ground up and be more responsive to the working class, because there are jobs, for instance, that didn't exist years ago when the labor movement was strong. And there are jobs that have gone by the wayside thanks to NAFTA and things like that. We have to be more nimble beasts. We have to be able to respond to forces in the market like now, rather than have this knee-jerk reaction somewhere down the line. Labor has to realize how strong we truly are if we have the majority of the American people behind us, whether they're union members or not.
Well, tell us a little bit more about your book and how you got the idea and how you came up with your 25 causes there.
Okay, well, I had been a union president, and I'd seen the breakup of the phone company and how it affected people, and the loss of jobs that we had. SBC was a whole different animal than we were used to with AT&T. AT&T came out of the Northeast, and they had a really pretty good relationship with their unions. Whereas once SBC took over, they were headquartered in Texas. We know about Texas, don't we? Texas said, "My way or the highway," and they started laying people off and firing people for things that would have gotten them a slap in the hand previous to that. And so I decided to run for office. I ran for political office twice, and both times I ran against a congressional staffer who he represented the status quo, and he had his boss behind him, so I didn't stand a chance. So I figured after two futile attempts at that, I would just write down in my book what had transpired, was good and bad about the labor movement, and my own experiences. And then I realized that maybe kids today wouldn't find that relevant. So I started looking into the things that are relevant today, like the gig economy and universal basic income, those kind of issues. And I found out how way far back they actually go. And I think if we implement a lot of those things, then we'll stand a chance to get back in the driver's seat in this country, and not have the corporations and the wealthy decide what's important to the whole of the country.
Telecommunications has taken over the market, as well as social media. Uh, how do you incorporate things like that into? I mean, these are things that we had never heard of, in '73, for instance, or in '80s. I mean, even in the late '80s, people that were doing programming. I mean, I remember the long IBM cards and key punch and all that. I mean, so how do you
Reconcile.
enhance? Well, reconcile is a good word too. How do you reconcile today's market with uh, labor? We have a different idea of labor today. I mean, labor used to be kind of like, the guy in the steel mill, the guy that did came around and fixed your house, the plumber, those.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of
For
those. We've seen a lot of those go away, haven't we?
right.
What we need to do is find a way to reinvigorate those industries, because there is a way. If you check out the UAW of today, my union, the National Writers Union, was part of the UAW. Does that make any sense? No, but a lot of these large unions that have represented basically one industry for most of their time they've been around have started looking elsewhere for other ways to grow and to serve the American public, so to speak. And the UAW was our home for many, many years. We've broken away now. We're looking for another affiliation, because we think in some ways we should be involved with communications. So we're looking in that direction, but nothing's off the table as of yet. But one of the things that we realize needs to be done is we need to go think outside the box. UFCW, you were mentioning before, United Food and Commercial Workers Union, that represents grocery clerks. They're actually in the process of organizing weed dispensaries.
Right. Especially out here in California.
Exactly. Because one thing that millennials know is that the labor movement, having a stable job, is a no-brainer. And they're a much more receptive audience than you and I might have been back in the day.
Kind of sticking with what's happening today. You also have, like, well, you mentioned the weed dispensaries and things like that. You also have some new industries popping up, solar, wind, water. I mean, there's all types of new industry popping up. But you're talking about dealing with millennials. Do millennials trust the unions?
Yeah. As I mentioned in my book and the next one, unions need to be rebuilt from the ground up. Gone are the days when we have this guy in the back room with a big fat cigar deciding everybody's fate. And what we need is, like I said, a nimble labor union that's able to adapt to change quickly. And I'm seeing some of that. My own union, the National Writers Union, has made deals for freelancers of various magazines who are allies, I guess you might say, in the cause of progressive politics. And so in these Times Magazine and others like that have agreed to a set of guidelines on how to treat freelance workers. So, and we also have gone after people who are trying to get jobs in this country from other countries, and they're already being brought in on a H-1B visa. So we allow them to affiliate with the National Writers Union. And that is only going to grow the union even more. So we're trying to, our union and other unions trying all sorts of things to be creative and to empower the middle class.
Can you empower the middle class without raising the minimum wage? Regardless of whether it be $11, $15, I mean, it's almost scandalous how long it's been since we've raised the minimum wage.
It is, and it's being fought for tooth and nail by the FLCIO. So we realize, yeah, that is probably a make or break deal for a lot of folks. If that comes through, then they'll see that the unions can accomplish things like the PRO Act, for instance, that will allow us to go in and get 51% plus one and make that workplace a union place. So under Joe Biden, a lot of things are turning in our direction. Not fast enough, if you ask me, but they are happening.
Well, tell us a little bit more about the first book.
The first book, The 25 Ways. Nobody has ever asked me the 25 ways. So, so I'm not prepared to answer that question, but keep in mind that it's got 26 chapters. So it's very well. Each chapter has at least one way that the system has been rigged against us, as I mentioned before. Healthcare, housing, and homelessness. The criminal justice system, or as I call it, the criminal injustice system. All these kinds of things have made it really hard for us to move up the ladder. It used to be a lot easier if you put in your hours and you paid your dues, so to speak, that you would see some light at the end of the tunnel. When I came into the phone company in 1973, wages, economists say, flatlined at that point. So no matter what ups and downs we had, wages stayed the same. So that's why we were never ever able to get ahead. And so this is talking about ways that maybe we can change the conversation. There's a chapter, I don't know if you've heard of the Powell Memo.
No.
The Powell Memo, Lewis Powell was a judge. And in 1971, his friends at the Chamber of Commerce said, we're tired of these dirty hippies and the anti-Vietnam protests. We need to take over the conversation. So he sat down and wrote him this 19-page memo about how they could go into the colleges, the schools, the think tanks, and take over the conversation and get what they wanted. Conservative business did that very thing, starting with Richard Nixon. He was so impressed with the guy, he made him a Supreme Court justice. So that's where the Powell Memo came in, and agencies like the Heritage Foundation, funded by the Koch brothers, and all these organizations came to power, and they took over the conversation. Labor just had to keep its head down and hope that we would survive to fight another day, which is what we're doing now. So the Powell Memo is a blueprint for big business. If you read through it, you'll be shocked and surprised at how much of that is being followed, even by Donald Trump.
Well, in 1971, I was fighting another battle, so it was a little different for me. But no,
thanks for that.
Well,
because you went, I didn't have to go. I turned 18 in 73.
I turned 21 in actually in 1968. So things were a little bit different when you speak of how they treated the Vietnam War and things of that nature. Because but my biggest pet peeve is that I don't really see how things have managed to change for the better. I'm not going to say that they've changed, but I don't see how things have changed for the better. We have, I think, we have a big working force, but that's because we have more people. We have less unions than we've had before. Basically, when you think about the cost of living and wages have not kept up. So what do you, if you have 25 now, is your next book 50?
It certainly looks that way, doesn't it? But what I'm hoping is by drawing a line between what was and what can be, people take that on, because I don't have all the answers in this book, and I don't pretend to. In fact, I tell you right up front in the last chapter, called Evolution or Revolution, that I don't have all the answers, and that smarter people than you and me are going to come along and come up with some of these answers. All we can do is keep the fight going, and that's what I intend to do. This is my life's work, and I've always wanted to make lives better for working people. I grew up dirt poor in the wrong side of the tracks in a small town in Texas, and frankly, I've never wanted to look back, because I maybe I need to see how far I've come and see how far we've come, because you're right. Some of those things are coming to the forefront, and that's good. I'm glad to see them exposed to daylight so that we can finally deal with them.
Uh, do you think it's time, when you look at people, our age and older, uh, the Mitch McConnells, you look at the Lindsey Grahams, even Joe Biden himself. Do you think it's time that we put our eggs in another basket, and by that I mean a younger basket? I have one of my thoughts that would make things better is if, first of all, we had term limits,
Hmm.
and second of all, if we made sure that our elected officials weren't above the age of 55. I
What if
think that.
somebody's there's a couple of
Well,
things, if you don't mind me jumping in
okay.
here. There's a couple of things. First of all, we do have term limits. It's called elections. What we need to do is teach civics in our schools, so that more people know who's running for office, and how to really look into their background, and really properly vet them, because otherwise you're just going on name recognition alone. That's why all these bad guys keep getting reelected, because they know their name. And when they say on the ballot, oh, yeah, I know that guy.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so that's part of the problem. Term limits also, if you've got somebody who's doing a great job, do you really want to see them walk out the door? Uh,
But
another another thing with term
but
limits is, the problem is, from day one, once they get elected, they're on the phone constantly trying to raise money for the next election. If you lengthen term limits, if you made it so they were like there for 4 years instead of two, they wouldn't immediately have to get on the phone and start raising money. They would have time to actually do their jobs.
on the other hand, uh, does one get too comfortable once they've been in for too many terms? Like you said, the first thing they do is get on the phone and want to raise funds for their next election. Well, if he knew he could only be there, he or she could only be there for 12 years, rather than see, people that come in that are making $150,000 a year leave as multimillionaires. I mean, there seems to be something wrong with that picture.
No, I understand your sentiment, and I've talked to a lot of friends who agree with you that if you had that in place, then there would be no question that the office would get turned over to a new person. But I really don't think that's the answer, and it's too bad, because in a lot of ways that would give more of us a chance to run, and see what we could do in the office. And I know other countries do that, but I don't know. I have some friends that are in the House of Representatives, and I think they're doing a good job. Like Adam Schiff, he's been there quite a number of years, and he's a little on the conservative side, but he's a good guy, and he's really taken the job to heart. So, and AOC, she's even too young to run for president. So
Yeah,
we've got the gamut there. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
but in the meantime, she's getting the experience, and like you said, that name recognition. That's what,
Exactly.
and then my second point is that, when I was talking about people over the age of 55, and I'm 74, so I understand that the experience and those arguments, but also I think that we are a little too old to be setting uh, the precedents for the future generation. I think we need to like at least let someone that's not that far away from, as an example, uh, President Biden is older than I am. Okay, so so things that I remember, that means that he remembers too. I remember, I mean,
That's
hey,
true.
I remember, see Spot run. For instance, in first grade, I remember having to learn how to write my name rather than type it on a keyboard. You know,
Exactly.
yeah, I remember, having to, whether it was right or wrong, I remember having to say the Pledge of Allegiance and the Lord's Prayer uh, when I went to school. So things have changed. Kids don't do that anymore. As a matter of fact, it's probably hard to get kids to even go to school, but that's another whole conversation. But I mean, can can he realistically, unless he's putting younger people around him, can he realistically address the terms of tomorrow? We have enough problems, with the terms of today. He has to look forward to the future. Now, I'm not saying it's the best thing that was ever thought of, because I thought it was really kind of stupid, but and a waste of money. But for instance, Donald Trump with his space wars. Well, I mean, it might be a little too early for something like that, but eventually, if we're sending probes into Mars and beyond, then I mean, this is something to look forward to in the future. So,
Well, even
uh,
though
uh,
we've got a president, you and I both know that he doesn't necessarily make policy. I mean, there are certain things he can do with executive orders and all that. But what you have to do when you're elected to high office like that is surround yourself with the best and the brightest. And I have a lot of faith in Kamala. If anything should happen to Joe, I think she could step into his shoes very easily and take over. And there, do you have your person that presents a younger viewpoint? Also, you won't have old men sending young guys off to war.
well, that's another discussion
Conversation?
too,
Yeah,
because I mean, just from past experiences, I have found that this is still a very much a war-based economy. If we don't have a war or some type of conflict around the world, then this economy remains very flatulent.
that's
Uh,
another thing that bothers me. By the way, there's another thing in my book talking about Project 1033. And I don't know if you're aware of that. Project 1033 was started to fight the war on drugs under Nixon, and what they are mandated to do is the Department of Defense is supposed to sell um, military grade stuff to law enforcement for bargain based prices. And so we've got an LA Unified School District that has uh, two grenade launchers, an MRAP, which is a vehicle to avoid mines,
yeah.
and lots of AK 47s. What does the school district need with all that hardware? I don't understand that, but that's part of what's wrong with our system is this kind of thinking that lets schools and colleges have those kind of weapons that law enforcement doesn't even know how to use.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's well. Now, in your book, do you touch on police reform at all?
Yes, it was still a fairly new issue when I was doing my research, and that's definitely going to go into the next book. I did a webinar this last summer, and my first speaker was a guy named Bill Fletcher, who wrote an article in These Times magazine about police unions. And I feel that even though Richard Trumka said they're like bad employers, we can work with them. I don't think that's necessarily the way to go with this. We need to again have a meeting and sit down policies that labor unions should not be involved in and ways to fix systemic racism from the ground up. again, that's the way to go. It's from the ground up, because that's where the people know the answers.
So when you say from the ground up, usually when we hear that, that means that you're going to tear down the building and start from a firm foundation. First of all, I can realize that, well, I can kind of justify you tearing down the building, but is there a foundation left for you to build on?
I do believe there is. I think that one of the ways we tear it down is by starting to reallocate resources. If we have a domestic dispute, you don't send a cop with a gun by himself there. You send a social worker along to sort of defuse the situation, because a cop with a gun is not going to defuse the situation. And if you reallocate sources, which is what they talk about when they talk about defunding the police, that allows you to rebuild based on building community trust and doing things the right way, rather than going with a knee-jerk reaction to every situation where you see a man who's bigger than you towering over you, and you fear for your life.
Well, you keep leading me into more questions here, because one of the healthiest unions that I remember growing up was nurses and doctors. Well, doctors didn't necessarily have a union, but I remember nurses having a union in my particular town. Anyway, when you have a healthcare system that is overwhelmed uh, now by the pandemic. Before, I thought it was kind of I thought there's always been fewer healthcare people than we need. I know, for instance, here at the VA, there are certain positions that are frozen. There are certain positions that no longer exist. It's usually the lower paying jobs that have maintained the steady flow. For instance, the workers in the cafeteria, the
Janitors.
right? There always seems to be. At least a few of those positions open, but when it comes to an operating nurse or maybe uh, a nurse's assistant, those jobs seem to be further in between. Uh, with that and the strain on that the GOP is talking about with Medicare, they're talking about taking Social Security, things like that. What do you think? How do you see the future of those particular healthcare unions and those people that are supported by the healthcare industry?
The person that edited my book for me is a nurse with Kaiser Permanente, and
Okay.
and I interviewed her recently for an article I did for I think it's called Thrive Global, and we talked about healthcare burnout, because that's one of the most crucial areas as far as having a negative impact and with the burnout is somebody who's looking after your health. And she counted out the symptoms for me, things like fatigue and not answering the buzzer that a patient is pushing right away, things like that. And there's no reinforcements coming up, because it's, as you mentioned, worldwide. So they're seeing this problem around the world. And one of the things that we've been able to do, what the nurses have been able to do, is get some hazard pay for that very difficult work that they do. And believe me, they are appreciated. And I think even more so now than before the
My
pandemic.
my hazard pay was $55 a month. I mean, You know,
Oh, that's ridiculous. Yeah.
so I mean, I don't know what she considers hazardous pay, but
I think it's $5 an hour or more or something. But yeah, you're right. Is it really ever enough?
yeah, I mean, so, but I would like to get her on the program also. So if you could forward her name, and
Be glad
perhaps we
to.
could also talk to her. So, when did you start the research for your second book, and when can we start hearing things?
Well, the second and third are kind of running neck and neck. Because one's called Rebuilding Union, and the other one's called Capitalism: The Global Edition. Friends of mine, when I was doing my research for the first book, said, "Well, that's America. You can't talk about any other countries in your book because you're just dealing with the American labor movement and what's going on there. We have ways that we're dealing with things here that don't equate." I said, "Fine." So on the global edition, what I've done is I've compared and contrasted 4 countries on how they treat their working class. That's France, Norway, Morocco, and Thailand. The last 2 in there because I actually know people on the ground there who will give me this straight up information on how they're being treated. So one of the things that I found that in my research is that labor used to have this real strong socialist base. And because of the Red Scare and McCarthyism and all that stuff, we kind of shied away from it. And now we're positively afraid to use the S word. So what we have to do is realize that this unfettered capitalism needs to be counterbalanced somehow, and maybe socialism, democratic socialism, is the answer.
Democratic socialism.
Right.
That's kind of what I consider myself to a certain degree, rather than, I mean,
Me
uh,
too.
so uh, what is your assessment of Biden's first 55 days in office?
I'm cautiously optimistic. How's that? I think that he's doing some right things, but he's so used to, as the old Democrats do it, baby steps, that maybe he needs a good boot and to get him going. But he is talking about bold action now, and that's really comforting to somebody like me who backed Bernie Sanders the whole time he was running, because there's so many. Do you want me to wait?
No, no, I'm good.
Okay, so there are ways that we can boost the action that he's doing by putting pressure on within the Democratic Party and within talking to our legislators. I think that a lot of them are willing to listen and realize that now is the time for bold, innovative action. For instance, it's $1,400 a month. Isn't that ridiculous? There are other countries that were giving that once a month for the whole time during the pandemic. And in fact, Bernie tried to do that. He tried to make it retroactive to when the pandemic started to the end of the pandemic, and they didn't go for that.
Well, that's because of, like you said, the S word.
Yeah.
Regardless of the benefits, if you put that S word in front of it, it tends, and I sometimes wonder if the people that are so anti-socialist really know what socialism is. But that's probably a different question also.
Yeah.
Uh, uh,
Socialism means for society, and democratic socialism means we don't want to seize the means of production. We just want to make a better life for working people.
and now, what do you see as the future of AT&T? I know now I have AT&T Uverse, and there are some days when I mean, wow. I'm
Uh,
like, well, why am I giving you this much money, to watch HBO? But
they're walking away from that technology now. What I think is interesting is they have a telecommunications guy heading up Warner Brothers Studios. What do they know about TV or film other than sitting at home watching it? And that's not the kind of people you need out there in front of that kind of technology. I think that in some ways there's going to be a marriage of a lot of these technologies, and as we've seen during the pandemic with instant streaming and movies coming right to your house. But that's not how theaters make money. That's not how a lot of people in the food chain make their money. So we're going to see maybe a combination of those, hybrids, sort of.
Well, that's. I also do a boxing show and a
Oh,
sports show, and those are things that, believe me, the boxing industry is trying to figure out. There's no more stadiums with thousands of people being able to watch fights. As you mentioned, movie theaters. Will the movie theater industry ever come back as we know it? uh, even the making of films. But getting back to the diversity of uh, the telecommunications and unions, do you think that this is ever going to be a successful marriage again? Because I mean, when Ma Bell was around, the telecommunications union was probably second only to the laborers union.
actually, yeah, and what we've seen transpire over the last several decades is this move towards empowering public unions, things like people that work at the DMV and the postal workers and all that. And so they're a much greater percentage now than we are in the private sector. I think we're down to about 10% in the private sector and about 30 to 40% in the public sector. So one thing we need to do is bring that roaring back. And the way we're going to do that is what I want to do is things that we did under FDR. FDR, who had a gold star that businesses put in their windows when they had a good relationship with their unions, so people knew that they could shop there. If we could get those kind of proactive things again, I wrote a letter recently to Richard Trumka saying this is what we need to do. And what I did was I took that Powell memo and I gutted it, and I everywhere it said big business or conservative business, I plugged in progressives and labor, and because we can adopt that same plan and take back that conversation, be back in the driver's seat of this country.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I was a kid, there was a little brass button on my jeans that said "Made in the USA."
Right.
Uh, Now I'm paying. Well, I'm not paying, but I'm looking in the catalogs, and you're seeing jeans that have holes in them, and are, I mean, look like somebody, the dog had just had a fight with them, and they want $200 for a pair of jeans, and it
I
says,
know.
made in Italy, or even what might even be even less. Well, more of an insult is when you got a 200 pair of jeans that says "Made in Mexico." But anyway, I digress.
Yes.
Uh,
Or car. Or car. Yeah.
yes, yes, yes.
That's what corporations are doing too. Is it's called a race to the bottom. Every time they find that the wages have gone up too much and they've started growing a middle class like China, they move again. And every time that comes up, they move to a cheaper place to produce these goods. And like I said, it's a race to the bottom, and that's just not sustainable.
Uh, uh, China. I'm going to let you go after this one. I promise. Uh,
I'm having fun.
uh, the relationship between the United States and China, as far as the tariff, has it helped promote unions in the United States, or the fact that I mean, for the most part,
Short answer, no.
Chinese. Do you think that there's a way, even with President Biden, that we're going to be able to cope with this Chinese labor?
That remains to be seen. I know that China is trying to make friends with all the people that Trump managed to alienate, and so that's a big concern. But I think that we have to stand firm. We can't go back to giving them most favored nation status, which is what they had prior to Trump, and after he messed with them a bit, they didn't want that anyway. So I think what it boils down to is that we need to go toe to toe with them and not allow them to devalue their currency and those kinds of things that have led to this inequality.
Well, I want to thank you so much, even though we were a little late getting in, but hey, everything, I'm thankful for the conversation. I'm looking
Same here.
forward to, why don't you tell everybody where they can find your book, how they can possibly purchase it, and
It's on about 350 outlets. So if you go to Powell Bookstore in Portland, Oregon, you can get it there. You can go to I hate to say this, Amazon. You can go to Barnes and Noble, or you can go to my publisher, XLIBRA. Wait, XLBRIS. There we go. Ex Libris. They have it there also. But it's been a pleasure, James. And anytime you want me back to talk about the next book or all sorts of things that I'm working on, I'd be glad to.
Oh, hey, I definitely want you. You're going to be kind of my labor expert here. When I get ready to talk about things labor, I might be hitting you up. So
Thank
check
you,
your
brother.
email.
Okay.
Thank you so much for coming on tonight, and I appreciate you. And you have a great night.
Wish you the best. Thanks.
All right.
You too.
That was Mr. Dan McCrory, and once again, be sure you check out his book. The man has been in the communications industry, as I said, for 37 years now. 1973, 37 years. Has some great insights into the industry and what the splits. So if you're not really old enough to remember the breakup of Ma Bell, check out his book and his views on the ways that the middle class has been, once again, as I say, has been eliminated. We still have a few people that want to. You understand?
I apologize for hanging up on you. I'm so used to being the one meeting that just automatically hits the button.
No problem. Don't worry about it. You have a good night.
You too.
All right. Yeah. It's sometimes when people come on for the first time, it's a little intimidating. Sorry we didn't get a chance to talk to Miss Sims tonight. I'll try to get Mr. Lewis on next week and see if he can tell us more about what's happening in Minneapolis. As you know, last week when we were talking to Brother Williams, we were talking about the unusual circumstances for which the young brother perished. And I do see Brother Williams is here. So since he's here a few minutes early. Good evening, Brother Williams. How are you doing?
I'm good, brother. I'll talk to people.
I did have my other guest. I let him off a few minutes early. So why don't we kind of get started tonight? What did you like to discuss with us tonight?
Well, I want to bring up the fact that we had a very interesting weekend. We actually had one of the original members of the San Diego Black Panther Party that was involved back in the 60s meet up with us over the weekend. Man by the name of Buddy Hauser met up with us over the weekend and kind of just schooled us a little bit on. We had a question and answer session, and he basically just talked to us a lot in regards to how things were then, in retrospect to how things are now. And we kind of just had a roundtable discussion and built off of a lot of the differences between the Black Panther Party of the Sixes versus the Panther movement in general now. And one of the things that I did find very interesting that he spoke on was the fact that he talked about the significant impact that heroin and drugs played in sweeping through and basically wiping out certain elements of consciousness within the Black community. And he talked about how that played a role as well in the destruction of the Black Panther Party at that point in time. And then I got to thinking, and I looked back on that you had such an impact in terms of how, and I would say the CIA at this point, because it's been proven that they were behind a lot of the of drugs being flooded in the community, that tactic being so successful. The same thing took place in the early stages of the new Black Panther Party, which created a lot of dissemination and a lot of leadership that ended up taking over and moving things in the opposite direction. And then you seem to have the same thing anytime there's a conscious movement and a conscious sweep that happens throughout the United States. There seems to be some type of drug situation right along the side of it, coming creeping right up and influencing and putting a whole nother generation right back to sleep. And I thought it
Oh,
was just interesting hearing him talk about that.
opioids. We can keep on we can keep on going crack opioids. I mean, we can keep on going down the line. Like you said, back in the '60s, it was heroin. In the late 2000s, well, early 2000s, it was crack, and you had opioids. I've always said, and a lot of people think it's very narrow-minded of me, but I've always said that we never recognize a drug problem until it becomes a drug problem in the white community.
Right, right. And yeah, and so it just was interesting hearing him go into that discussion with us, as well as one of the other things, the good viewpoints that I got out of the discussion was I would say what you have now, I refer to as the gap between those that are actually conscious in the movement and those that are on the sidelines that are just participating in it. What you had back in during his day and time, because you didn't have the same level of technological advancements that you got now, to where obviously when there's a police brutality incident or anything going on in the community, to where you could just go straight up to Facebook and then connect the world that way and that easy. So back then you had to be more of a traveler. As a result of that, a lot of the Panther membership and a lot of people that were involved in just the civil rights movement did a lot of traveling throughout the country, and so you had more boots on the ground, people actually interacting with one another and really being able to see the activity and the differences and having to be strategic about their operations as a result of actually having to deal with things firsthand, regardless of where you are within the nation. Whereas I've noticed nowadays, because of our technological advancement and our codependency on it, you have less tangible, physical, on the ground. Let me go check this out and investigate it for myself and see what's really going on. And as a result of that, what we find is that it allows the person to not have to be as strategic and not much of a critical thinker as they were back in those days. See, you had to do your own investigation back then. You couldn't just go on the internet, punch in a few words, and see a story. So you literally had to be in touch and in tune with what's going on in the community. Whereas now, because of social media, uh, part of that investigation, which creates it gets the head turning and creates an environment to where you have to be a great critical thinker, is basically overlooked. And since that part is overlooked, you have more people actually involved in quote unquote spreading the news or spreading the story and consider themselves to be actually activists without actually ever touching the ground. And so when I look at that dynamic, I got to thinking, I was like, yeah, so back then you actually had to understand and know the difference between strategy and tactics. And so therefore, when you strategize, you literally had to plan out and think about your next moves. Whereas now people go to, you know, are able to pull up information so quick that they leave out the critical thinking part and they just go straight into tactical mode. And now you get this protest mentality that everybody has. And so it just really drew a perspective on the level of direction and the level of education and knowledge that you had to have back then versus now, which is why so many people were able to, I would say, even be more vocal and speak on polity versus now where people don't even save their brain power to even have these type of conversations because they can just go straight to YouTube or some other platform on social media and just type it up and then just watch a sound bite or two and go from that and then just spread that information. So we had to be more well read back then. So just the level of people, the level of education and involvement that you had to have just to be conscious in the movement back then was a lot different. And so we talked about that dynamic, and I just found that to be real interesting.
Um, but isn't that the opposite effect of what technology and the internet was supposed to bring to bear? I mean, it was supposed to uh, bring you the information and then you process it and, uh, come to a conclusion. But at some point in this evolution, we have forgotten, and you mentioned it a couple programs before, we have forgotten that step of critical thinking. It's watch and do. There's no, like you
Hmm.
said, there's no strategy in between, but that wasn't its intent, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't think it was the intent either. It's just that I think what happened is, and see, this was even part of the reason why we met with that generation and why we continue to build with our elder generation, is because there seems to be a missing link in a lot of the things that we are taking for granted. I think in a few episodes ago when I talked about it, I referred to it as our immaturity as a result of the fact that technological advancements continue to move at a high pace, whereas our natural physiological uh, growth and brain, is still operating on the same way it's always been operating on. We age at the same pace that we did 30, 60, years ago, but technology is moving a lot faster. So here we are as people becoming emotionally immature and not capable to keep up with the technology that we use in terms of our thought processing. And when you have a older generation that you can refer back to that can guide you through the reasons why and going into the particulars as to um, you know the cautiousness you should have and the things that you have to learn, then you come to find out that regardless of the medium or the platform in which knowledge is being presented, there's just a certain amount of knowledge that you just need to soak up. If we took back in the day, if we would take 2 hours out of our day to read a newspaper and to read a book, um, whereas now somebody will watch videos for 2 and 3 hours, are you getting the same type of content? Are you constantly being inundated with the same story, just retold by two or three different people on the internet telling you their version of what somebody said? See, someone can have a 2 hour discussion about a chapter or a few pages in a book and then give you their spin and they take on it, but what's happening is you're not getting your own um, take on by reading it and digesting it directly, getting your own insight on the situation, which again goes into why critical thinking is being thrown out the window from that perspective. And I think what's happening is that we're getting so much of an information overload that people can't be decisive in terms of what they take in, because everywhere you look somebody has their version of what they want to tell you about what this person originally wrote or originally did. So you can have a situation that happened in the streets and you got 20 different people want to give you their take on it. And at that point in time, how do you got time or how do you have the mentality to actually go and see for yourself what happened? Whereas back in the day, we would do that. We would get on the bus, we would drive, we would fly, we would literally touch down and gather the evidence ourselves and be able to meet and greet and deal with the story firsthand. And since things are so instantaneous now, people emotionally are charged to just jump right into action. And so therefore, jumping right into action doesn't give you time to process what it is that you're being introduced to. And so you jump the gun. Oftentimes you jump the gun, and this is what creates this protest culture versus that being a actual tactic. It becomes your strategy. And so having an elder actually talk to us about this and explain and be able to step back away from it and see it, then if we're as a younger generation, if we're sincere about our efforts and our works in the community, then we would listen to that, because sometimes people are too close to what it is they're involved in to actually recognize the mistakes that they're making. And I think that's real important when you deal with generations being able to pass the baton to the next generation, is that you have that connection with each generation so that we don't make these same mistakes and we don't miss these critical aspects because we're too close to the situation ourselves.
It seems to me that at some point there was a disconnect. Some point between, I would say, the 1990s and the early 2000s, where we either became too complacent or, to put it in ancient terms, we thought that we had overcame.
Well, I see
What?
that. I see jumps in that. Um, because you say this, it's like, to me, the same thing kind of was happening in the late 70s into the early
Right.
80s. So,
Precisely.
well, and one thing I can draw a reference to, and this just goes back to some information that I used to build on with a brother named Progressive Professor Griff, with actually with Public Enemy. Professor Griff was the Minister of Information of Public Enemy, as well as he's a griot and a powerful teacher just in general. And what he goes on to talk about is, you can actually see within the hip hop or rap culture that there was a period of time to where, for instance, when Public Enemy was actually bringing the noise and actually raising and bringing political conscience within the hip hop, all of a sudden, what ended up getting the boost was this quote unquote gangster rap. And as
Right.
gangster rap basically became mainstream and became what was designed to make the dollar and what was designed to be put in your ear, it put a generation of people asleep. And so it was literally an attack on our consciousness. And a lot of people just think of it as music and don't recognize how music was actually weaponized and used against us as a weapon to actually make sure that a certain, a good percentage of us don't wake up, because music touches your soul. And a lot of times we take for granted the power of music. And most oftentimes people are just caught up listening to the beat. And I even go into this in some of the Panther training that I get at recruits, and talk about the carrier frequency and the underlying message. So anytime you got data, is being transported through a carrier. The carrier, when it comes to music, is that beat. Oftentimes you get a nice beat going and somebody get the bob in their head and moving, and the message that's being transmitted through that carrier frequency, which is that beat, is often not even paid attention to. And before you know it, here they are reciting words of something that they know, if it was stated a cappella, that they would not give 1 second thought about learning. But because it's being subliminally submitted through them through this beat, it actually reaches right into your subconscious and connects with you, and you start becoming what you are viewing your perception in your world based upon this mess that you're taking in.
Yeah. Video games too. I think we've also uh, dehumanized people. People don't realize, that life is not a video game. Uh, you have so much
You muted. Hey, James, you're muted. I don't know if you can hear me, James, but you're muted. Your mic's muted, James. Can you hear me? Your mic is muted. Your mic is muted, James. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Your mic is muted. Your mic is muted. I can't hear you.
Can
There
you
we
hear me
go.
now?
Now I can hear you. Yeah,
Okay.
you was talking away. I couldn't hear anything you said, sir.
All right. Now I can't hear you.
Oh,
So,
really? Can you hear me? 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 Testing,
come back
testing.
in. Can we hear you now?
Can you hear me? Testing, testing, testing,
Yes.
testing.
Okay, I can hear you now. Yes,
Okay.
we're
All
good
right.
now.
All right.
All right. So did you hear what I was saying the last time when I was
No.
okay? What I was saying was we now seem to have a combat mentality within our neighborhoods, but it's an there's no rules of engagement. Uh, you see, I mean, people talk about black on black crime. But we're talking about a younger generation here. You're talking about, numerous bullets shot into people's houses. You're talking about a younger generation where you see 13 and 14-year-olds that have no value for human life. Uh, and I also think that this is a product of the things that they engage. For instance, something that I had never heard of until I came here to San Diego, and I've had numerous uh, anger management classes. One of the things that my and it goes back to what you were saying. One of the things that my psychologist told me that I should not, or he recommended highly that I not listen to the lyrics of rap music, uh, because I mean, in some ways, I guess it kind of triggered the old feelings or whatever. But after a while, when I took myself off it, I kind of realized what he was saying. I wasn't my thinking wasn't as aggressive. I was more open to listening to people. I did not make myself a fortress. I was more of a vessel for learning rather than a master of conflict.
Gotcha. And what I would say about that is going into how music is weaponized against you. What you find is it basically puts you in the mode of being a reactionary, because what you're doing is you're being inundated with certain types of messages that create basically or reflect anger. And by reflecting anger from that position, it puts you in this tunnel to where you automatically jump to the conclusion of a certain perception on everything that's going on around you. And as a result of that, it just basically makes you less out to even, again, like we stated earlier, critical think. One of the things I learned in even in dealing with the discussion we had over the weekend, what he talked also about is the fact that when the party was demised back in the mid 70s, you, as it was demising going into the 70s, you started having a rise in gang violence. a lot. So it's like a lot of the lessons, initial lessons that the community was learning and building upon within the Panther Party was actually being the ideology got removed, and the militancy basically became your street gangs. And so you ended up with these what's often referred to as the bastards of the party, and the gang culture increased. And as the gang culture increased, you just started basically having people that organized around basically the camaraderie. But now, because there's no ideology that tied the people to a movement that had the people to want to uplift the community, they basically ended up terrorizing the community. And so, in essence, the gap that we're talking about is a repeat right now. It's the same thing repeat. Whereas whenever you have a powerful movement going, then you start finding some kind of way to destroy it. And in doing so, now you start bringing in certain levels of reactionary violence. So that reactionary violence you're talking about, especially as it's portrayed through music, is just glorified. And by being glorified, now all I see is this type of environment. Even those people that are not from that directly or experience it directly, when they live it through the music, then they own it. And when they own it from that perspective, that becomes what they see, and that's how they view life. And when you have a generation of people that look at life that way, how can you get them to want to take an active change and being progressive?
Um, have you seen a change in the younger generation uh, as far as the degree of consciousness, or are we still caught up in the trappings of the hip hop world? You know, the gold chains. You know, the sagging baggy pants. The disrespect for your elders. Are we making any progress within our own community as far as the word respect, which is something that another word that I think that we've kind of lost sight of in these past generations?
Well, I felt like as a result, honestly, and this is one of the things I give Donald Trump credit for. But I think because of the polarization that he created, I think last year, the 2019, 2020, you started having more of a resurgence of consciousness simply because people started getting slapped with it right in their face, particularly the black people as well as people that are just on the lower end of the economic scale. We started getting slapped with things in our face to the point that I think it made people try to kind of take a step back and look at things in a different light. So I do feel like here recently there has been more of an uptick in levels of consciousness coming out of the community. And my attitude is to continue to magnify and build upon that. So I agree that there has been a trend that was set into play, but my attitude is always to try to work against that trend, work against the grain, and bring more people back around. I don't want to just come off as if I'm complaining about the current generations, because the attitude and idea is to get them to wake up, and so it's about doing a part like with your show. It's about doing what we can do to wake up and get more of our people of a younger generation reconnected with the elders. And so that's why I made a conscious effort to do the same thing and try to combat the negativity that's going out there and combat the lack of knowledge and lack of wisdom that the younger generation has, which goes into that respect thing that you had. So it's what's weird about that is, you know, when you get to a point to where the elders are oohed and awed and find it amazing that you respect them, that just lets you know how far down we've slipped to where respect is actually not expected at this point. And so when an elder gets the respect they deserve, they're shocked. And that's a sad thing to me that is that bad off.
Um, when you since you mentioned Donald Trump, we've seen a recent surge I think about 46 states now are trying to restrict voting rights once again for people of color. Um, what's your thoughts on this? As I said, I'm still amazed that you know HR1. We're still talking about. I thought these things were passed in 1968. 1972 we had riots. We had EEOs. Uh, 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 Brother Robert, I mean, what's going on here? Why are we still fighting the same battles? And not only are we fighting the same battles, but we find new hills confronting us.
Yep. And what I do want to talk about when it comes to that is one of the things that I've also talked about with the past generations is the difference between civil rights and human rights. One of the biggest mistakes that we allowed ourselves to, I would say, get blindsided with and connect with is the aspects of civil rights. The deal is there should be that, we should be looked upon as black people in quote unquote minorities, which we're not the minority in the world, but we should be looked upon as addressing human rights. Because when you allow legislation to give you or grant you the same rights of another human being, and you buy into that, then at some point that can be stripped away from you in the same breath. And so, from that standpoint, if we allowed ourselves to be defined as a human being according to a constitution, then when that same opportunity presents itself to be able to undo that, what does that make you now? It puts you right back in the position you were in beforehand, where now we're going back to property. And so we have to recognize that it's not a civil right that we should be fighting for, but a human right. And I think that's the biggest thing to take away from that is that is the recognition that what we should be addressing is human rights across the board and not civil rights.
Um, is this something that you teach in your excuse me? Is this something that you teach in your seminars with your young Panthers?
It is because I get them to recognize basically when we talk about all power to the people, that we're not drawing a distinction based upon race at that position. The whole point is if the people come together, if the people, whether it be black, white, brown, whatever, if we come together, we unify. All of us are humans, and the oppression that we're fighting is based upon a systematic type of oppression, as well as based upon a type of oppression that has to do with constantly finding ways to divide the people against themselves. Then it opens up to your perspective on what type of fight you're in, because if you want to narrow things down and keep constantly dividing yourselves, and what you do is you divide your power. As you divide your power, then that just puts you back on an island. And that's exactly what they want. They want us to be conquering, divided, and find reasons why we won't work with one another versus the reasons why we need to recognize that we all should share the same type of rights and values. And so, in addressing it from that perspective, it just gives people more of an opportunity to grow and to learn and not fall into the same level of traps. So we recognize, and even going back to what you saw with Malcolm, you recognize the fact that, the same issues that we're facing here are getting faced all across the world. And so from that standpoint, we have to fight for human rights. It's not about legislation that allows one to be placed upon the greater than the other based upon skin color. So we shouldn't fall for that type of stuff in the first place. So when it comes down to that, to me, and I can't say that we can see it happen in the near future, but it actually even goes back to rewriting what the Constitution is. Because as long as you're dealing with a legislation that can be taken, that can strip away your right to be able to participate in the political system just because of your skin color, then we had a lot of ground to cover. We got a lot of ground to cover when we're really dealing with it from that perspective.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, you preaching to the choir. What did you think about the George Floyd's jury selection so far, and the fact that they did finally bring up a third-degree murder charge?
Well, kind of cautious on the whole situation. Um, so I really don't have a whole lot to comment yet on that because I just want to kind of see where things take off. But I want to be optimistic about things. But at the same time, it's not like we ain't seeing the same writing on the wall regardless. Um, so I'm a little concerned. That's the best I can say on that. What I do want to speak up on a similar situation is that the Kendrick Johnson case here in the past few days was finally reopened. And Kendrick Johnson was that brother that they found, 17-year-old brother that they found rolled up in a mat, and they basically it was initially ruled as like he killed himself, which that doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Why killed himself and rolled himself up in a mat? I mean, doesn't that? I mean, it happens all the time.
Right. That was crazy.
Yeah, yeah. But
And so,
yeah, I think this is is this in I mean, was this found after the young brother that we were talking about last week? Is this in addition to?
yes, yeah, because what we're talking about is well, this is the same case that was dealt with 8 years ago. That the case was basically dismissed, and they've continually fought on the back end. His parents have continually fought, and they finally made enough headway and got the right people behind them in office to where they was able to get this case reopened. And to me, that's just the same level of injustice as we're talking about when we talk about George Floyd. So it's a lot of cases out there. Just going back to the Anthony Harris case that we're dealing with in El Cajon. There's a lot of cases out there of injustice that just need to be brought to light. And the reason why a lot of this slips out, in the cracks is because there's just not enough people out in the community actively able to work the various cases. We got more cases of injustice than we got people that are willing to step up to the plate and get justice.
I
And
think
so,
that I think the key phrase there is willing to step up.
right, willing to step up. You're right. It's so easy to just sit back on social media oftentimes and just be inundated with the stories and just send likes and things like that. But I mean, we got to go back to what one of the elders was saying me and be on the ground, be active. But that's not just simply protest, but that's actually active in the entire process of seeking justice. And that's where the real work comes in, and that's the day-to-day stuff that go unrecognized. There's only so much you can report on a daily basis in regards to uh, I guess enticing and making the story sound um, you know to the point to where it attracts more people, so to speak. And injustice is injustice. We have to fight. We have to make change. You can't keep covering the same thing over and over and over again and continue to think that you're going to draw more traction. People just have to have a genuine love for one another to the point to where we're willing to stand up for each other
Yeah,
without constantly having to be been bombarded with the same situation, and it had to be somebody that we know personally.
yeah. I think a lot of people think that when the protest is over, once the march is over, then the work is over. And it just becomes a scab that you know you just kind of take for granted. It's something that's going to happen in the community, and hey, happened last week, it'll happen again. I
Right.
think I think that's uh, you know maybe a tribute as to how we've become another phrase that I find. I guess I kind of coined this phrase, but we become trained sufferers. You know,
Hmm.
we have to find something. You know, we have to be singing sad songs. We shall overcome, and we have to always be the victim. And uh, this is a way I think victimology uh, is a part of our life, rather than from talking about victimology from a capitalistic side. Uh, so, as usual, Brother Robert, it's always good talking to you. I learn more every time I talk to you. And I've especially learned about these two incidents that you just mentioned. Why don't you give us your final thoughts for the evening, and let everybody know how they can be a part of this uh, protest, a part of this movement. But we have to get our young brothers and sisters involved, and we also have to stop thinking that we are always going to be the victims of some type of brutality, whether it's political or capitalistic. We have to learn how to shape and maintain our own destiny. Your final thoughts, sir?
My final thoughts on that is that, the deal is we just need to have more people involved into the movement. And so my chant is always get involved, get involved, get involved. Um, by next Monday, I will be able to give you our website, that our official website that you can turn to. And we actually got even a small headquarters we're in the process of opening up. So the work does continue. We're making headway, making ground. And I just want more people to sincerely want to seek justice, sincerely want to help, and sincerely want to be a part of making change for the better for the community, regardless of your background. Recognizing that it's not don't wait till you're a victim to jump in, because that's actually the wrong reason. We should all want to do it because it's just the right thing to do. When we talk about the individual, we talk about family and community. All three things should share equal value in your life. So community should not be something that we have to pull your arm to be involved in. If you want to reach us on Facebook, uh, Black Panther Party San Diego, um, just hit us up on Messenger from that standpoint, and from there we'll reach back out to you. And I'll go ahead and give my phone number on the air right now. If I don't answer, it's probably intentional. Leave a message, and then I will follow back up with you. But it's 619-777-8675. That's 619-777-8675. So you can reach me through my phone directly. So from that standpoint, people, let's just stay active, and let's be aggressive in about seeking justice and change for our people and for all people. All power to the people.
All power to the people, Brother Robert, and I'll see you again next week.
Thank you, sir.
We'd like to thank our guest, Mr. Dan McCrory, Brother Williams. Looking forward. Maybe we can get Miss Sims on next week, as well as Miss Palmier. I am seriously trying to find a woman's point of view on some of the recent things that have happened with this administration, and just on a newsworthy basis itself. Have a great night, everyone. I will see you next Monday right here on To an Imperfect Union. Have a great night.